Well, thank you for joining us today for another episode with our one of greatest author. Today we have the honor of interviewing Mr. Bård Borch Michalsen. I forgot to ask you if I am pronouncing it correctly.
Yes, that's
Bård,
okay. Thanks.
welcome, Bård.
Thanks. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here and actually to be back in Buenos Aires because I was physically visiting Buenos Aires in June and that was really, really amazing.
You loved it.
Yes.
And now
I
you are connecting from Italy.
actually, yes, I usually live in Norway, in the Arctic part of Norway. That's very, very, very far north. We usually say that Alaska and Siberia is in the south. I live at
Mm.
69 degrees north, working at the Arctic University of Norway, which is the northernmost university in the world. But
Wow.
actually now for some months I'm living in Italy, smart working, giving lectures online to Singapore and to Norway, and also teaching in Rome. And it's a real pleasure, of course, being in Italy.
Amazing. Congratulations. So you're accustomed to the cold weather and
The weather
Ama-
is very nice in Italy. Actually, it's been a very hot summer. And still it's September in Europe also, and it's fall, but today it was 29 degrees Celsius.
wow. Amazing. Congratulations. Well, Bard, we have your book. I have it.
Thanks.
You have it translated into Spanish.
Yeah.
Yes, your latest book. And do you speak Spanish? Just a little.
No, I'm
No.
no, sorry, I don't speak Spanish. When I was in Buenos Aires, actually, I spoke English, but I also understand advertising and the science at restaurants in Spanish because I speak a little Italian. And Italian and Spanish, they are cousins. Uh,
Exactly.
so I understand some words, but of course I should have been able to being interviewed in Spanish. That's a pity. But
No,
let
it's
but
a pleasure.
but let's do it in English then.
Yes, of course. It's a pleasure. Thank you for your time and for your willingness to share with us as translators and specialists with the language. Your book is full of very useful and insightful information for us because it just the title, How Punctuation Changed History, Signs of Civilization, and I loved every word of it. And I would like you to share with us how this idea as an academic, a professor, and all your vast career, how did it appear to you to write about punctuation specifically?
Actually, it was by accident. Actually, I've always been interested in communication and language and these things from I was a small child, and I've written quite a lot of books about also about communication and these things. And I believe it was 9 years ago, my editor asked me, "Do you want to write any book now?" And then I was very well. I shouldn't have done it, but I told her, "Yes, you'll get 10 good ideas by Monday. 10
Mm.
brilliant ideas," I told her. And I was sitting during the weekend writing, finding ideas, but I only found 9 ideas. Then
Mm.
okay, promised her 10. So then I wrote number 10. I believe the world needs a book about the comma. That was all, nothing more. And she called me and told me, "I take that comma book." I
Wow.
so then I started writing, actually I did not know a lot about it. I didn't know very much, but I started researching, gathering stuff and all these things, and then a book called Comma was published only in Norwegian. I believe it
Yeah.
was 2014. And after that, I wrote a book about how you should write better at work. I've written a book about the verbs who is actually the thing in the language which make action. And then I told my editor, okay, now I know much more than I did before, because I've been researching a lot, I've been talking to people, I've been reading, etc. So I want to write a book about how did all these signs, the comma, the semicolon, the full stop, etc., how did they be a part of the growth of civilization in Europe? And then I started writing the book, which we now are talking about. How did these signs become a part of European civilization's history? And when I say Europe, I would say Europe included, of course, Argentina, because in this sense, Argentina is a part of our culture, the part of the big European nation and culture. And it was very nice and fun and interesting writing the book. And I believe it. I hope also that somebody wants to read it, which I know a lot of.
Yes, it's a lot of research you have done, because it's full of, like, the book is divided into 3 parts, right?
Yeah.
Is there a specific purpose of you for you of doing like part 1 before everything?
Yeah.
And then
Yes, actually, the part, as I remember, the first part is about the history, about what was going on.
the before
The
writing,
second,
yes,
yeah,
how the
yeah,
word existed before writing.
yeah, and then about the signs, and about the full history, and about each sign, and finally about what's the situation today, and what is actually going on, and how will the future be? Because, as you know, language is a living organism, and everything is changing, and perhaps also the punctuation. Nowadays we got emojis, blah blah blah, and we got
Exactly.
TikTok, and Messenger. So things are changing.
Exactly, a lot in every language, right?
Yeah.
And as you said, in part 2, when you specifically develop all the idea of these signs of civilization, you talk about the English disease,
Yes.
about the Oxford comma.
Yeah.
And as translators, we are always dealing with the Oxford comma.
Yeah.
And why do you think it's?
Do you use it? Do you use
Yes.
the Oxford comma? Okay, I don't use it. I think
Sometimes,
it's
depending on the client's request.
okay. I actually believe that the Oxford comma is a kind of it's not logical. But I see that
I agree.
50% believe this is a good thing. 50% says that it's ridiculous. But I call it an English disease. But okay, if they want to use it, let them use it.
I love the disease, let's say, because sometimes I'm not a writer. So as a translator, sometimes I have to, of course, explain, but if the client, decide it's necessary or useful, I just have to agree, respect, let's say.
Because actually the most controversial sign is the comma. I believe if you Google full stop or period, you get just a few. If you Google full stop and conflict, you get just a few hits. If you Google comma and conflict, you get millions. Comma and errors, millions of hits, because the comma is quite. The comma is. I enjoy the comma, but it's a quite controversial sign. How to use it, and actually actually most people don't use it correctly.
You are right. Mostly, yes,
Mostly.
because unless you are like a language specialist or a professor or someone very interested in writing and speaking correctly, because if it's your mother tongue, you don't pay attention. But even in Spanish, you make mistakes, even if you are,
But actually, I believe that everybody should learn the ground rules of punctuation at school, and that's not it's not because we should be mean to the children, but when using the signs correctly, you write more fluently, you write more correct, you write more clear, and it's easier for the reader to understand what do you actually mean.
exactly.
And the modern language research, brain research, neurolinguistic shows that actually as a reader we understand better if the punctuation is okay.
Of course, for sure. And in Spanish, as you also mentioned, we have exclamation and question marks at the beginning and at the end. That's, I think, the only language.
And that's very nice. Actually, I believe you should, or perhaps the academy in Madrid school should have ask for a meeting in Brussels and ask the European Union to do this as a European way of doing it, because I think it's actually good communication. Because when you have an exclamation mark before the sentence, also, then we know what is coming. When there is a question mark, we know, okay, a question is coming. Let's see what they are asking about. So I believe it's a nice thing both in the beginning and at the end. So congratulations to the founders of this sign in the Spanish language.
But you know, nowadays it is like not many people use them just at the end. They tend to forget that the rule is at the beginning and at the end. So it's difficult. I mean, like for young people and all that, they say just at the end, you know, and sometimes you see advertising and signs, you know, without the proper exclamation and question marks.
I believe you should keep it.
Yes.
The possible reason for this is influence, of course, from the English language.
Yes.
Perhaps especially among young people.
You're right.
And but you should keep it. It's a kind of Spanish speciality.
Yes, we are different in that. And now that you are there in the beautiful Italy, and I also, as I told you before, I have my ancestors coming from Italy as well. What's your opinion about the Italians? How do they take care of their own punctuation marks?
When I'm trying to read Italian newspapers and Italian books, I believe the situation is not very good. Actually, I had a meeting the other day with the professor in rhetoric, and he was worried. He said that it was very sad because he thought that young people in Italy now neither could talk nor write, neither could speak nor write, and the situation for written Italian, he was not optimistic. And actually, I read also in the newspapers that teachers and professors are they think that the situation should have been better. So I hope that somebody soon will raise her hand and say, ladies and gentlemen, we have to be sure that every child at school, every teenager, every student at university get an opportunity to learn to write properly, because that's a part of our civilization.
Yes, but our civilization, as you also wrote in your book, and the last part, the movement, the cultures, how with the pace of our daily lives nowadays, in contrast with our ancestors, let's say, it makes also all these changes in our own way of communicating and our own languages.
Yes, and actually nowadays we send messages through our mobile phone, through WhatsApp, through Messenger, through whatever, and when we write through these media, we do something between talking and writing, and we use emojis, and of course then a lot of people forget using the punctuation marks. And okay, that might be okay, but everybody should know that when you write at school or at your job or at the university or in the newspaper, you should write properly within these channels and situations.
Exactly, for academic purposes, for business, and all that. And as you said in one part of your book, that you describe a day of a writer, like when she wakes up and she texts and then begin writing and all that, and how it differs, the way she used the punctuation marks specifically. So that was very, very nice and very insightful for all of us working with languages, how we use them differently, let's say, depending on.
And I believe that everybody should know the rules, not many rules, but some rules, and then use them with some kind of respect. But if you know the rules, you also perhaps may play with these rules. As you know, I'm not sure if I have this in the book, but the famous Spanish artist Pablo Picasso says that you should know the rules as a professional, and then you may break them as an artist. And that's also valid for punctuation, I believe. If you know the rules, you can play with the marks and use them rhetorically.
Exactly. And not for perhaps them. Well, yes, also for us, like we are always learning and keeping on evolving, in our own profession. But what would you recommend us to improve or to do in order to improve and to apply, as you said, the correct way of expressing in our own languages?
I believe you should know some 10 rules, and then and then you should always ask yourself, when you ask yourself, should I use this comma or not? Then the question is, will using this comma make the text easier to read or not? Does it make the communication better or worse? That's because we have the science to communicate better. That's the reason. It's not to make life complicated for everybody writing. It's for making life easier for those reading and to make communication easy. So ask yourself your question: what will the reader think? How will the reader feel? Should I use it or not? Yeah, but
exactly.
Just a few rules, not many. Actually, punctuation, I think that it's more a way of, it's more a kind of philosophy, an approach to writing, an approach. Okay, I know I've got some signs, and if I use them in a nice way, the readers will read my text easier and they will understand what I say better. So use these tools wisely and your readers will be happy.
Amazing. As you also said in your book, the idea is to communicate, from the word comunicare, from the Latin word, in order to connect and really understand the message that you're trying to convey. Amazing. And just to round up, Bård, what would, if you would like to share with us, if you have a word or a saying that you live by or that you always remember as a writer and academic, so engaged in our...
That's a tricky one. Well, it might be more things, but I've actually choose a cliche. You may say it's a cliche or it's very boring, but since I'm in Italy, I could use the old saying from a writer 2000 years ago, which said "Carpe diem," which actually means seize the day. I believe that's a good one, but it's not very unusual. Perhaps, of course, I should have been much more. I should have found something more special, but I think it's right. Carpe diem.
It's always relevant, and even more today, because we tend to forget the importance of being present and enjoying, really seizing, the present, because we are always like running ahead and, we don't have time, but it's important. Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you. And I hope your translator, who's Christian Kupchik, the translator into Spanish, can translate also your other books, because as Spanish-speaking audience, we cannot read them in your mother tongue language.
I really hope so. Thanks for being a guest here, Dolores, and I hope to see you, and I hope to come back to Buenos Aires.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the time. Until the next book. Thank you. Bye-bye.